The tracks of the legendary Orient Express have been hiding a dark secret for a century. Have you ever taken an unforgettable train journey? That secret became the key to an impossible modern-day murder. In this video, you'll see how history's most famous train became both the stage and the solution for a modern crime. Beneath the grand glass ceiling of Paris de Lyon, a modern echo of a legend breathed with a silent power – the Europa Express. This was more than just a train. It was a tribute to the past, a rebirth of 19th-century railway romanticism with 21st-century technology. Its dark blue and gold-leafed carriages carried the soul of the fabled Orient Express, which had once transported kings, spies, and impossible loves. But beneath the surface lay a beast that could traverse Europe from end to end at 300 kilometers per hour, as quiet as a whisper. Its passengers were chosen to match this spirit, the last representatives of old-world aristocracy, the tech billionaires of the New World, and among them, those who possessed the ruthlessness of both. One of these passengers was Antoine Dubois. Dubois was a conqueror of the corporate world, a man who had risen not by acquiring his rivals, but by destroying them, leaving a trail of wreckage and an army of enemies in his wake. As he watched the lights of Paris slowly recede from the window of his luxurious compartment, his face bore that usual expression of disdainful self-assurance. What he did not know was that this train was traveling not only from Paris to Istanbul, but also into a dark corridor of the past, and that he would be the final victim of this journey. 2 days later, as the train crossed the wide green plains of Croatia and moved towards the rugged terrain of Serbia, the impossible crime was discovered. Antoine Dubois was found dead in his bed, in his first-class compartment. The door to the compartment was locked from the inside with that old-fashioned mechanical bolt that only a person inside could slide. The window was closed. The ventilation grate was too narrow for even a child's hand to fit through. With the train making an emergency stop at Belgrade Station in Serbia, the carriage entered the jurisdiction of Europol. And to solve the knot of this complex cross-border crime, one of the sharpest minds in the agency was called to duty – Detective Isabella Rossi. Rossi was a woman in her early 40s, methodical, calm, and rarely showing her emotions. She believed in evidence, in timelines, and in digital data. For her, every crime was a puzzle whose pieces, when assembled correctly, would inevitably lead to a single logical conclusion. When Rossi boarded the train, she felt as if she had stepped into another era. The interior of the carriages, with their Art Deco wood inlays, velvet seats, and brass lamps, was reminiscent of a scene from Agatha Christie novel. But beneath this classic decor lay a modern technological network, RFID cards that recorded every passenger movement, facial recognition cameras hidden in the corridors, and sensors that monitored even the energy consumption of each compartment in real time. Rossi knew that this combination of two worlds would both simplify and complicate this case. The initial findings only deepened the mystery. The train's medical officer, based on the body's temperature and the state of rigor mortis, had determined the time of death to be between 1:45 and 2:15 a.m., when the train was near the Croatian city of Slavonski Brod. This meant that the killer had to be still on the train. Rossi systematically began to interrogate all the passengers and crew, and she encountered the first impossible piece of the puzzle. Without exception, every single passenger and crew member had a digitally verifiable alibi for the time between 1:45 and 2:15 a.m. Some were in the dining car, proven by credit card records. Some were watching movies in their own compartments, time-stamped by Internet activity. Others were confirmed to have been seen in the corridor at that time by the sleeping car attendant. And most importantly, the alibi of the prime suspect, Yelena Petrova,
Antoine Dubois' biggest rival, with whom he had had a public argument in Paris, was the most solid of all. All digital records on the train, security cameras, and even the passport scan data from the Croatian border police showed that Yelena Petrova had disembarked from the train at Zagreb station, a full 3 hours before the alleged time of the murder. Rossi found herself in the most frustrating case of her career: a victim, a locked room, and a train full of suspects. But all the suspects had proven that they could not physically have been near that room. It was as if a ghost had infiltrated a train traveling at 300 kilometers per hour, committed a murder behind a locked door, and then vanished as silently as it had come. Days turned into weeks. The train was held on a sidetrack in Belgrade, converted into a forensic laboratory. Rossi and her team re-examined every detail, every piece of data, over and over again. But the result was always the same. This crime was logically impossible. In her frustration, Rossi decided to change the focus of the investigation. If modern evidence was giving her nothing, perhaps the scene of the crime itself, the spirit of the train, could whisper something to her. She focused on the historical accuracy that the Europa Express advertised, its obsessive adherence to the route of the original Orient Express. This led her to an old man in Vienna, in a forgotten side street away from the city's noise, who ran a small railway museum and archive, Mr. Elias Vance. Elias was a man in his 70s, with white hair down to his shoulders and bright, curious eyes like the headlights of old locomotives, a character frozen in time. His archive was his personal kingdom. The shelves were filled with leather-bound old train schedules, hand-drawn maps, emblems of railway companies, and yellowed photographs. The nostalgic smell of old paper and machine oil hung in the air. When Rossi explained the case to him, Elias was not very interested in the bloody details of the murder. His eyes lit up when he saw the modern Europa Express schedule that Rossi laid on the table. "Ah, yes," Elias said, his finger tracing the cities on the route. "Paris, Zurich, Venice, Zagreb, Belgrade, Istanbul. The original route of the Simplon Orient Express. Almost a perfect match. But the word 'almost,' detective, is where the devil hides." Elias took down a huge, leather-bound, worn-edged book from the bottom of a shelf. On the cover, in gilded letters, it read, "Campagne Internationale des Wagons Elite. Timetable, 1925. When he opened the book, a smell of mothballs emanated from the pages. "Look," Elias said, pointing to a complex train schedule on a yellowed page. "Your modern train crosses borders without stopping, doesn't it? The Schengen Agreement, digital passports. But in the 1920s, every border was an event. The locomotives, the crew, even the dining cards would change." His finger pointed to a spot on the border between Croatia and Serbia, which was then an internal border of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. "Here it is, that small, nameless stop between Vinkovi and Šid. The jurisdiction of the Croatian railway company ended here, and that of the Serbian company began. But there was a decades-long dispute between the two companies about the synchronization of their schedules. So when the train arrived at this point, it would stop for exactly 15 minutes. It would wait in a kind of no-man's land, neither in Croatian nor Serbian jurisdiction, for the next locomotive to be connected. These 15 minutes are not fully accounted for in any official schedule. A time gap, a crack." Rossi held her breath listening. "The Europa Express," Elias continued, "is so obsessed with historical accuracy that although it is not written on their websites, they still make an unrecorded technical stop of about 15 minutes at that point for the power transfer and system check between the modern locomotives. No one knows this, only crazy historians like me." In Rossi's mind, the pieces of the puzzle were illuminated by a flash of lightning. The time of death determined by the medical officer. What if it was wrong? What if the killer had deliberately manipulated the body's temperature, using the compartment's air conditioning or another classic trick, to create a misleading result? What if the murder had been committed not at 2 a.m. while the train was in motion, but during that 15-minute, unknown, unrecorded stop? And Elena Petrova, could she have never disembarked in Zagreb? Rossi left the archive after thanking Elias. She now had a theory, and to prove this theory, she had to return to the modern world. Rossi's first act was to request the raw, unprocessed GPS and maintenance data of the train from the Europa Express's main servers. And after hours of analysis, she found what she was looking for: a 14-minute and 50-second stop, not on the schedule, at the exact geographical point Elias had described. The second step was to hunt down Elena Petrova's digital ghost in Zagreb. She re-examined all the security camera footage from the station, this time second by second, and finally, she caught that small, overlooked detail. In the clear image where Elena is seen passing through passport control and leaving the platform, for a brief moment, in the reflection of a bright display case in the background, Elena can be seen handing her ticket and passport to another woman in a hat, whose face is not fully visible. A double. Elena had never disembarked in Zagreb. While her double walked out for her, she had hidden in another part of the train, perhaps in a crew uniform after a simple change of clothes.
Now, Elena Petrova was not a suspect. She was a fugitive. And Rossi was also beginning to understand her motive. Her in-depth research revealed that Petrova's family had been bankrupted and had lost everything years ago due to a ruthless corporate move by Antoine Dubois. And strangest of all, the story of this betrayal was eerily similar to a side story in a fictional novel by Agatha Christie, set on the original Orient Express. Elena was not just taking revenge. She was reenacting a historical revenge with a literary reference. The chase had now turned into a race against time on the railway lines of Europe. Rossi was trying to predict Elena's next move, and finally she understood where she would go, to the place where the story should begin and end, to the final destination of the Orient Express, to Istanbul. The confrontation took place in the magnificent tiled waiting hall of the historic Sirkeci railway station. As Elena was about to board the next train to cross into Asia, Rossi cornered her. Elena was not surprised. On her face was not the disappointment of being caught, but a strange satisfaction that the genius of her plan had been understood. She confessed everything: how she had discovered that time gap in the old railway schedules while researching her family's past, how she had used this historical knowledge to create the perfect alibi for a modern murder. Everyone was looking at digital data, GPS, cameras, Elena said, her voice calm and cold. But no one thought that a 100-year-old piece of paper could hide a crack in time itself. Elena Petrova was arrested. The impossible crime was solved. In the final scene, weeks later, Isabella Rossi was drinking a Turkish coffee in one of the historic cafes at Sirkeci Station, looking at the old black-and-white photographs on the walls. In one of the photos, the stylish passengers of the 1920s were posing in front of the original Orient Express. Rossi understood in that moment that no matter how advanced technology gets, the greatest secrets and the most clever tricks are always hidden in the forgotten dusty details of the past. The century-old secret of the rails had waited for the right moment, for the right revenge to be used. Beneath every modern journey lie the ghosts of old roads and forgotten stories. To discover how the timelines of the past can can solve the crimes of the present. Don't forget to subscribe to Parallel Storylines. See you in the next case file.